You know what is funny? My dad called me uneducated and worthless on a microphone while his entire company was quietly surviving because of me. 200 people laughed, and I smiled like I agreed. Then I stood up, raised my glass, and said one sentence that turned the whole room to stone. I did not come back for forgiveness. I came back to end the story on my terms. My name is Serenity Mitchell, and if you looked at the seating chart for the evening, you would have found me at table 42. It was the table furthest from the stage, tucked so aggressively into the corner that every time a waiter exited the kitchen with a tray of shrimp cocktails, the swinging door brushed against the back of my chair. This was not an accident. In the Mitchell family, geography was a language, and my father was fluent in it. The Seabrook Harbor Club was suffocatingly expensive tonight. It was a humid evening in the suburbs of Savannah, Georgia, but inside, the air was conditioned to a crisp, sterile chill. Overhead, crystal chandeliers the size of small cars refracted the light into 1,000 dizzying prisms. Below them, the elite of the logistics and shipping industry gathered to worship at the altar of Graham Mitchell. There were 300 people in the room, a sea of black tuxedos and evening gowns that cost more than most people earned in 6 months. The sound of crystal glasses clinking together sounded like falling hail. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, wearing a black dress that was simple, elegant, and entirely invisible. That was the point. I was 34 years old, yet to everyone in this room, I was a ghost. I watched my father on the stage. He stood behind a mahogany podium, bathed in a warm, golden spotlight that made his silver hair look like a crown. He was 65, handsome in a way that suggested power rather than warmth, and he was smiling the smile that had closed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "Legacy," my father said, his voice booming through the high-end sound system. "It is not just about what you build, it is about who you leave behind to guard it." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. I took a sip of water. The ice in my glass had melted an hour ago. "For 40 years, Mitchell Port and Freight has been my life," Graham continued, leaning into the microphone. "But a captain cannot steer the ship forever. Tonight, I am not just stepping down, I am stepping aside for the future." He gestured to his right. "Please welcome my wife, Cynthia." Cynthia glided onto the stage. She was 55 and looked 40. Thanks to a regimen of Pilates and very expensive dermatologists, she wore a dress the color of champagne and a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. The applause was polite and practiced. "And," my father's voice rose, swelling with pride, "the man who will carry the torch, the new CEO of Mitchell Port and Freight, Logan Price." My stepbrother stepped into the light. Logan was 37, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a tuxedo that had been tailored in London. He waved to the crowd with the easy confidence of a man who has never had to earn his parking spot. The room erupted. Men stood up. They cheered. They saw themselves in him. The golden air. The continuity of power. I clapped exactly 3 times, just enough to be recorded by peripheral vision. Not enough to be a lie. I knew the numbers of the company better than Logan did. I knew that their operating margins had slipped by 12% in the last quarter. I knew that their turnover rate in the Savannah distribution center was bordering on catastrophic. I knew that Logan had blown $2 million on a warehouse automation system that was currently sitting unused because he had forgotten to account for the software integration costs. But the room did not care about balance sheets tonight. They cared about the show. Graham waited for the applause to die down. He put an arm around Logan's shoulders and kissed Cynthia on the cheek. It was the perfect portrait of American success. Then, the air in the room shifted. I felt it before I saw it. My father's eyes scanned the crowd, bypassing the front tables where the senators and investors sat, bypassing the middle tables where the senior vice president sat, and landing with laser precision on table 42 by the kitchen door. The spotlight operator, following his cue, swung the beam across the room. It blinded me for a second, a harsh white glare that stripped away my shadows. "And of course," Graham said, his voice dropping to a register that sounded affectionate to strangers but felt like ice to me. "We have Serenity." The room turned. 300 heads swiveled. I did not flinch. I kept my chin level, my expression pleasant and vacant. "My daughter Serenity," Graham chuckled, a sound that invited everyone in on the joke. "She is 34 now, still finding herself, no degree to speak of, no career path. But we love her anyway. Do we not? Every family has one free spirit who needs a little extra help to keep the lights on." It was a masterclass in assassination. In 3 sentences, he had painted me as a leech, uneducated, worthless, a charity case existing on the fringes of his greatness. The laughter started as a ripple and turned into a wave. It was not a mean laugh, which made it worse. It was an indulgent laugh. They were laughing because they felt superior. They were relieved that the great Graham Mitchell had a flaw, and they were delighted that he was gracious enough to mock it publicly. They felt privileged to witness this intimate family roasting. I saw Logan smirk on stage. I saw Cynthia offer a sympathetic tilt of her head. Acting the part of the long-suffering stepmother, I sat there, bathing in their amusement. My heart was not racing. My palms were not sweating. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity settling in my chest. For 14 years, I had waited for them to see me. I had worked in the shadows, building a fortress they knew nothing about. I had hoped, with the foolish part of a daughter's heart, that I would not have to pull the trigger. But Graham had just handed me the gun. The laughter began to fade, replaced by the expectant silence of a crowd waiting for the victim to shrink away. They expected me to look down. They expected me to blush. They expected me to be the failure my father said I was. Instead, I stood up. The scrape of my chair against the hardwood floor was loud in the sudden quiet. I picked up my champagne flute. It was full. I had not touched the alcohol all night. I did not ask for a microphone. I did not need one. My voice had been trained in boardrooms that these people did not even know existed. I projected it clearly, cutting through the heavy air of the ballroom. "Cheers, Dad," I said. Graham blinked, the smile freezing on his face. "You are right," I continued, my voice steady, devoid of anger, devoid of sadness. "I have found myself, and this is the last time any of you will see me." I held the glass up for 1 second, a toast to the burning bridge, and then I set it down on the table with a definitive click. I turned and walked toward the exit. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel the confusion rippling through the room. This was not in the script. The failure was supposed to take the insult and stay seated. The leech was supposed to be grateful for the invitation. I pushed past the heavy double doors and out into the lobby. The sound of the party instantly muffled, turning into a dull roar behind me. I did not stop. I walked past the coat check, past the valet stand, and out into the thick, muggy night air. The humidity hit me like a physical weight, but it felt better than the air conditioning inside. It felt real. I was halfway to my car when the doors burst open behind me. The sound of high heels clicking frantically on the pavement followed. "Serenity! Serenity! You stop right there!" It was Cynthia. She was moving faster than I had ever seen her move, her champagne dress bunching up in her hands. Behind her, Graham was marching, his face a mask of furious purple under the amber streetlights. I reached my car. It was a black sedan, mid-range, 3 years old, respectable, but entirely forgettable, just like me. I unlocked the door, but Cynthia grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You humiliated him. Inside, in front of the governor, in front of the investors." I looked down at her hand on my arm. "Let go of me, Cynthia." "You act like a petulant child," Graham barked. Stepping into my personal space, he smelled of scotch and entitlement. "I make a light-hearted joke, and you stage a dramatic exit? Do you have any idea how ungrateful you look? After everything I have paid for, the apartment, the allowance?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the lines around his eyes, the fear hidden behind the bluster. He was a man who believed his own myth so completely that he could not imagine a world where he was not the hero. "You have not paid my rent in 7 years. Graham," I said quietly. He paused, blinking. "Don't lie to me. We send the check every month. And every month for 7 years. I have shredded it," I said. "I have not taken a dime from you since I was 27. "Bull," Logan said, appearing behind them, breathless, and looking like someone had just told him his trust fund was frozen. "You have no job. You have no degree. How else would you be alive?" "Go back inside," Graham commanded, ignoring my statement. "You are going to walk back in there. You are going to laugh, and you are going to apologize to the table. You will tell them you had too much to drink. Do it before it is too late." "Too late?" I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "You cut me off years ago. Dad, you stopped being my father the day you decided I was an expense rather than a daughter. Tonight I just said it out loud." I pulled my arm free from Cynthia's grip. She stumbled back, looking at me as if I had slapped her. "If you leave now," Graham threatened, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper, "do not bother coming back. You will be cut out of the will. You will be cut out of this family entirely." "I was never in it," I said. I opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cool. It felt like a sanctuary. I slammed the door shut, locking it instantly. Through the window, I saw Graham pounding on the glass, his mouth moving, forming words I no longer cared to hear. He looked small. For the first time in my life, he looked incredibly small. I started the engine and reversed out of the spot, leaving the 3 of them standing on the asphalt, a king, a queen, and a prince, realizing their subject had just abdicated. As I pulled onto the highway, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a single vibration, distinct and demanding. I glanced at the screen. The name displayed was Owen Hart. Owen was my chief financial officer. He was the only person in the world, besides my lawyer, who knew the truth. I tapped the speakerphone button as I merged into the center lane, putting distance between myself and the Seabrook Harbor Club. "Serenity," Owen's voice filled the car. He sounded tense. "I know you are at the party, but we have a situation. The Mitchell Port and Freight contract expires in 30 days. Their procurement officer just emailed me marked urgent. They are panicking. They want to lock in the renewal tonight. 5 years, 15% rate increase. They are basically handing us a blank check." I stared at the road ahead. The yellow lines blurred into a continuous stream of light. Mitchell Port and Freight, my father's company, the legendary empire. What Graham did not know, what Logan was too incompetent to figure out, was that the entire logistics backbone of their operation was outsourced. They thought they were hiring a faceless third-party vendor called Astorvale Strategies to handle their routing, their compliance, and their efficiency audits. They did not know that Astorvale Strategies was me. They did not know that the uneducated daughter had built the company that was currently saving them $4 million a quarter. They did not know that without my algorithms and my team, their shipping routes would collapse within a week. "Serenity?" Owen asked. "Do I send the DocuSign?" I imagined Graham back in the ballroom, shaking hands, drinking scotch, bragging about a success he did not understand. I imagined the laughter of the crowd. "Hold," I said. "Hold?" Owen repeated. "For how long?" "I will decide after tonight," I said. "Do not sign anything. Do not reply. Let them sweat." "Understood," Owen said. He paused. "Are you okay?" "I am better than okay. Owen, I am done." I hung up. I drove for 40 minutes until the city lights of Savannah faded into the rearview mirror. I pulled into a rest stop off Interstate 95. It was quiet here. The air smelled of diesel and pine needles. A few semi-trucks were idling in the distance, their running lights glowing like eyes in the dark. I killed the engine and sat in the silence. My heart rate finally began to slow down. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs, and let it out slowly. They thought this was a tantrum. They thought this was a wounded daughter lashing out because her feelings were hurt. They thought they could starve me out, wait for me to run out of money, and watch me crawl back begging for forgiveness. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were dry. My makeup was perfect. They had no idea. I was not just a rejected daughter. I was their largest creditor. I was the architect of their efficiency. I was the reason their stock price had held steady for the last 3 years. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was black and white, the edges soft with age. An older woman with sharp eyes and a kind smile looked back at me. My grandmother, Evelyn Mitchell, the only one who had ever seen me. I ran my thumb over her face. "Grandma," I whispered to the empty car, "it is time." To understand why I walked out of that ballroom without shedding a tear, you have to go back 14 years. You have to go back to Wilmington, North Carolina, to a house with white pillars and a manicured lawn that looked like it had been cut with nail scissors. It was the kind of house where neighbors assumed happiness lived because the windows were always clean. I grew up in that silence. My mother died when I was 9 years old. It was not a tragic, romantic passing where she whispered secrets to me on her deathbed while the sunset painted the room orange. It was fast. It was brutal. It was an aggressive cancer that ate her vitality in 3 months, leaving behind a sterile smell of antiseptic and the sound of a pen scratching on medical bills. When she left, she took the color of the house with her. Graham Mitchell did not know how to grieve. He only knew how to manage. He managed the funeral. He managed the condolences. And then he managed to erase the evidence that she had ever been there. Presumably because looking at her things hurt too much. For 2 years, it was just us. We were 2 ghosts passing each other in the hallway. I learned to make my own sandwiches. I learned to sign my own permission slips for school, forging his signature until I got so good at it that I could have signed his checks. I thought this was temporary. I thought we were just 2 wounded soldiers waiting for the war to end. Then came the invasion. I was 11 when Graham married Cynthia. She was a widow from Charleston with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes and a son named Logan who was 3 years older than me when they moved in. The dynamic of the house did not shift. It capsized. In most stories about stepfamilies, there is screaming, there are broken vases and slammed doors. There is a wicked stepmother who locks the girl in the attic. My reality was far more insidious because it was so quiet. There was no abuse. There was no shouting. There was simply a reallocation of space. Imagine a stage. Before Cynthia and Logan arrived, the stage was empty, and I stood in the corner. When they arrived, they took center stage, and the spotlight followed them. I did not get pushed off the stage. The stage simply stopped, including the ground I was standing on. Logan was 14. He was loud, athletic in a clumsy way, and demanding. He filled every room he entered. If he was hungry, the whole house stopped to feed him. If he had a soccer game, the family schedule was rewritten to accommodate it. I remember one dinner vividly. I was 12. We were sitting at the long mahogany table. Cynthia had redecorated the dining room, replacing my mother's warm oak table with something dark and imposing. "Logan made the varsity team," Cynthia announced, beaming as she served the roast. Graham looked up from his food, his eyes lighting up in a way I had not seen in years. "That is fantastic, son. We will have to get you new gear, the best cleats on the market." "I need a new gym bag, too," Logan said through a mouthful of potatoes. "And the coach says there is a camp in Florida next summer. It costs $2,000. "Done," Graham said. "Invest in your talent, and it pays dividends." I sat across from them, gripping my fork. I had a report card in my backpack upstairs. It was straight A's. I had won the district spelling bee that afternoon. I had stood on a stage alone and spelled words that adults struggled with. "Dad," I said softly. Graham turned to me, his smile fading slightly, like a man who had been interrupted during a favorite song. "Yes, Serenity?" "I won the spelling bee today," I said. "That is nice," he said. He did not ask what the winning word was. He did not ask if I was proud. He turned back to Logan immediately. So, Florida, we should look into flights early. That was the moment I realized I had been subtracted. It was not that they hated me. Hate requires energy. Hate requires passion. To them, I was just furniture. I was a lamp in the corner, necessary for the room to function. But nobody talks to a lamp, and nobody notices if the bulb flickers. The erasure was a slow, grinding process. Logan got a tutor because he was failing math. I got nothing because I was acing it. Logan got a car when he turned 16 because boys need freedom. I got a bus pass because it builds character. Cynthia was the architect of this architecture, but Graham was the one who signed off on the blueprints. He did not scold me. He just never looked at me. Do you know what that does to a child? To look into your father's eyes and see absolutely no reflection of yourself? It hollows you out. It makes you wonder if you are actually made of glass. The only person who saw me was my grandmother, Evelyn. She lived 3 hours away in a retirement community that cost more per month than most people earned in a year. But she refused to be put out to pasture. She called the house every Sunday at exactly 4 in the afternoon. "Put Serenity on," she would command. I could hear her voice crackle through the receiver, sharp and authoritative. I would take the phone to my room, closing the door against the noise of Logan playing video games or Cynthia complaining about the maid. "Tell me something real," Grandma Evelyn would say. "Not how are you, but tell me something real." I told her about my classes. I told her about how I reorganized the pantry because the chaos bothered me. I told her how I tracked the grocery budget in a notebook just to see where the waste was. "You have a mind for order, child," she told me once. "Your father has a mind for deals, but you have a mind for systems. There is a difference." "He does not care," I whispered, sitting on the floor of my closet. "He is a fool," she snapped. "He sees what is shiny. He does not see what is structural. But you listen to me. Serenity. You keep building that mind of yours. They will notice you too late, and that will be your advantage." Those Sunday calls were the oxygen that kept me alive. They were the only proof I had that I was not a ghost. By the time I was 18, I had perfected the art of being invisible. I applied to the state university 2 hours away. I did not ask for help with the applications. I did not ask for a campus tour. I just did the work. When the acceptance letter came, I put it on the kitchen counter. It sat there for 3 days under a stack of mail before Cynthia moved it to wipe the granite. "Oh," she said, holding it up. "State? That is, practical." Logan was going to a private university on the coast, a place where the tuition was $50,000 a year and the acceptance rate was based largely on who your father knew. "I am going to study operations management," I said. Cynthia laughed. It was a soft, tinkling sound, like ice hitting the bottom of a glass. "Operations? That sounds very dusty, sweetie. Are you sure you do not want to study something like art history or communications, something lighter?" "I like logistics," I said. "Well," she patted my hand, "girls do not really need to study so hard. You just need to be educated enough to be interesting at dinner parties. Stability is the key. Serenity. Find a nice husband who can take care of the heavy lifting." She was planting the seeds of mediocrity. She wanted me to be small because if I was big, I might take up space that she had reserved for Logan. I went to the state university. I packed my own bags. Graham drove me, but only because Cynthia had a spa appointment. The car ride was 2 hours of silence broken only by his business calls. When he dropped me off at the dorm, he handed me a credit card with a $500 limit and said, "Call us if there is an emergency." He did not say he would miss me. He did not say he was proud. He checked his watch because he had a tea time at 1. College was the first time I felt the sun on my face. For 3 years, I thrived. I was not the popular girl. I was not the party girl. I was the girl in the library at 10 on a Friday night, analyzing supply chain case studies. I loved it. I loved the logic of it. The world was chaotic. But in operations, everything had a place. If there was a bottleneck, you widened the pipe. If there was waste, you cut it. It was control. And for a girl who had no control over her own family, it was addictive. I maintained a 4.0 grade point average. I joined the logistics club. By the spring of my junior year, I felt like I was finally becoming a person. I was not Graham Mitchell's invisible daughter. I was Serenity Mitchell, top of her class. Then came the summer internship. It was a prestigious program with a major distribution firm in Atlanta. It was paid. It was competitive. 300 applicants for 5 spots. And I got one. I remember holding the offer letter in my dorm room. The paper felt heavy. Like currency. This was my ticket. This was the proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. With this internship, I could get a job anywhere. I would never have to go back to Wilmington. I would never have to sit at that mahogany table and be ignored. I called Grandma Evelyn first. "I knew it," she rasped. Her health had been failing, her voice weaker, but the steel was still there. "Go show them what you are made of." I was happy. For the first time in 14 years, I was genuinely, unreservedly happy. Then the phone rang. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The caller ID showed home. I picked it up, expecting Cynthia's passive-aggressive voice asking if I was coming home for the holidays so she could schedule the cleaners. "Serenity?" It was Graham. His voice was clipped, official. It was the voice he used when a shipment was lost at sea. "Dad," I said, sitting up on my bed, "is everything okay?" "You need to come home this weekend," he said. "I can't," I said. "I have finals coming up, and I need to prepare for my move to Atlanta for the internship." "Cancel your plans," he said. He did not ask. He commanded. "Why? What is wrong?" There was a pause on the line, a heavy, suffocating silence that reminded me of the days after my mother died. "Family meeting," he said. 2 words, just 2 words. But they made the temperature in my dorm room drop 20 degrees. We did not have family meetings. We had announcements. We had directives. A meeting implied a negotiation, or worse, a crisis. "Is it Grandma?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "Just come home. Serenity. Saturday morning. 10 o'clock. Do not be late." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone in my hand, looking at the internship offer on my desk. The joy I had felt 5 minutes ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, familiar dread. I knew, with the instinct of an animal sensing a storm, that the invisible walls of my childhood were about to close in again. I packed a bag, but I left the internship letter on my desk. Safe, or so I thought, from the black hole that was my family. I drove home that Friday night, the darkness of the highway swallowing my headlights. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was blazing with light. It looked perfect. It looked welcoming, but I knew better. I walked up the front steps, my key heavy in my hand. I did not know it then, but I was walking into the execution chamber of my dreams. The girl who walked through that door was hopeful, naive, and trusting. She would not be the one who walked out. The door to my father's study closed with a heavy, final click that sounded like the lock on a vault. The room was exactly as it had been for 20 years, paneled in dark walnut, smelling of lemon polish and stale pipe tobacco, and lined with shelves of leather-bound books that Graham never read. On the wall behind the desk hung framed awards from the Savannah Chamber of Commerce and a photo of Graham shaking hands with a senator. I sat in the stiff leather chair reserved for visitors. Graham sat behind his massive desk, his fingers interlaced on top of a file folder. Cynthia stood behind him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. She looked like a co-signer on a loan, present only to ensure the terms were enforced. "We have some news," Graham said. He did not look at me. He looked at the file folder. "Logan has been accepted into the executive leadership program at Wharton." I blinked. I thought Logan was on academic probation at his current college. That was a misunderstanding with a professor, Cynthia interjected smoothly. Her nails were painted a perfect, blood-red crimson. "This program is a fresh start. It is a specialized track for future industry leaders. It is a massive opportunity for the family legacy. That is great for him, I said, though I felt a cold knot tightening in my stomach. But you called a family meeting for this? Graham finally looked up. His face was composed, wearing the expression he used when he had to fire a longtime employee to cut costs. The tuition for the program is substantial, Graham said. It is $80,000 a year, plus living expenses in Philadelphia. It is an investment we have to make. He paused. The air in the room grew thin. The shipping industry is facing a downturn. Serenity. Cash flow is tight. We have to make strategic decisions about where we allocate resources. I knew where this was going. I saw the equation forming in the air between us. You mean you cannot pay for my final year, I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. My tuition is $12,000. Dad, it is a fraction of what you are spending on his country club membership. It is not just the tuition, Graham said, his voice hardening. It is the principle of allocation. We cannot support two households of students. We have to prioritize the asset that yields the highest return. Logan is the heir. He needs this pedigree. And what am I? I asked. A liability? You are capable, Graham said, dodging the question. You are smart. You can work. You can take a semester off, save up, and go back later. Plenty of people do it. I have a 4.0 GPA, I said. I have an internship waiting in Atlanta. If I drop out now, I lose that spot. I lose my momentum. I took a breath, deciding to play the card I had kept in my pocket for a decade. Mom made you promise, I said quietly. Before she died, she told me you promised that my education would always be covered. That was the deal. Graham flinched. It was a microscopic movement, a twitch of his jaw muscle. But I saw it. He opened the file folder and closed it again. A nervous tick. Circumstances change, he said abruptly. Promises made in emotional moments cannot dictate financial realities 10 years later. Your mother could not have foreseen the market conditions. It was a lie. It was a cold, corporate lie designed to absolve him of guilt. He was rewriting history to balance his ledger. I looked at Cynthia. She was watching me with a look of pity that felt like acid. Serenity, honey, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You are making this harder than it needs to be. A degree is just a piece of paper, honestly. For a girl like you, it might even be intimidation. A degree will not make you lovable. It will not find you a husband. The words hung in the air. A degree won't make you lovable. She was not talking about a husband. She was talking about my father. She was telling me that no matter what I achieved, no matter how many A's I earned, I would never buy my way into his heart. The seat was taken. I could have screamed. I could have thrown the heavy crystal paperweight at the wall. I could have cried and begged them to see me, to value me, to treat me with a fraction of the regard they gave to Logan's mediocrity. But I remembered Grandma Evelyn's voice. They will notice you too late. If I screamed, I was the hysterical daughter. If I begged, I was the needy child. If I fought, I validated their belief that I was a problem to be managed. So I did the only thing that would confuse them. I nodded. Okay, I said. Graham blinked, caught off guard. He had braced himself for a scene. He had prepared his defenses for a battle, and I had just walked off the field. Okay, he repeated. If that is the decision, I respect it, I said. I stood up, smoothing the skirt of my dress. I will handle my own affairs from here. Now, Serenity, Graham said, standing up halfway, looking suddenly uncomfortable with how easy this was. We are not throwing you out on the street. You can stay here for the summer. You can work at the local diner. We can help with groceries? No, thank you, I said. I will figure it out. I turned and walked out of the study. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently, sealing them inside with their choices. The next week was a blur of dismantling the life I thought I was building. I drove back to the university not to study, but to surrender. I went to the registrar's office and withdrew from my classes. The lady behind the desk looked at my transcript, then at me. "You are on the dean's list," she said, confused. "Are you sure? Is it a medical leave?" "Financial," I said. She handed me the forms with a sad smile. I signed my name, and just like that, I was no longer a student. I was a statistic. I went to the campus bookstore. I had a stack of textbooks. Advanced Supply Chain Management, Statistical Analysis in Logistics, Corporate Finance. I sold them back for pennies on the dollar. The heavy books that contained the knowledge I craved were reduced to $85 in cash. I packed my dorm room. It did not take long. I did not have much: clothes, a laptop that was 4 years old, and a framed photo of my mother. As I zipped up my suitcase, I felt like I was zipping up a body bag. The version of Serenity Mitchell who was going to be a logistics executive in Atlanta was dead. I did not go back to Wilmington. I could not breathe the same air as them. I looked at a map of the United States. I needed somewhere far enough away that I could not run home when things got hard, but big enough to disappear in. I chose Austin, Texas. It was 1,000 miles away. It was growing. And it was cheap, or at least cheaper than the East Coast. I drove my beat-up sedan west. I slept in the car at rest stops to save money. I ate peanut butter sandwiches and drank tap water. When I crossed the state line into Texas, the humidity of the South vanished, replaced by a dry, scorching heat that felt like it was burning the past off my skin. I arrived in Austin with $400 to my name. I found a room in a shared house on the outskirts of the city. My room was the size of a closet, with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. But it was mine. I paid the landlord in cash. I needed a job immediately. I printed resumes at the public library and walked door to door in the industrial district. I did not aim for the big corporations. I knew they would filter me out without a degree. I looked for the messy places, the warehouses with peeling paint, the trucking depots with overflowing dumpsters, places that needed order. I found it at a company called Rapid Route Logistics. It was a small, chaotic operation run out of a converted garage near the airport. The office smelled of stale coffee and diesel fumes. The owner was a woman named Mara Klein. She was in her 50s, with gray hair chopped short and a cigarette permanently burning in the ashtray on her desk. She looked at my resume, then at me. "You are an operations major," she said. Her voice was like gravel. "Why are you applying for a dispatcher assistant job? It pays $12 an hour." "I need the money," I said, "and I know I can help you." "Help me how?" she asked, leaning back. "I sat in your lobby for 20 minutes, I said. "I heard your current dispatcher take 3 calls. He routed 2 trucks to the same zone for pickups that are 10 miles apart, and he missed a delivery window for a client because he did not account for the rush hour traffic on A35. You are losing fuel and time." Mara stared at me. She took a drag of her cigarette and exhaled a cloud of smoke. "You have a degree?" "No," I said. "I ran out of money." "Good," she said. "College kids are annoying. They want beanbag chairs. I need someone who can route a truck." She hired me on the spot for the next 2 years. That garage was my university. I worked from 7 in the morning until 6 at night. I answered phones. I managed driver schedules. I dealt with breakdowns, weather delays, and angry clients. But I did not just work. I studied. At night, I went back to my tiny room and opened my laptop. I could not afford tuition, but I could afford internet. I took every free course available. I learned SQL coding on Khan Academy. I studied Six Sigma methodologies through pirated PDFs. I learned how to build automated spreadsheets that could do the work of 3 people. I treated my job at Rapid Route as a lab experiment. I started quietly optimizing things. I reorganized the filing system. I created a digital routing sheet that auto-calculated the most fuel-efficient paths for the drivers. One afternoon, 6 months in, Mara stopped by my desk. She was holding a monthly profit and loss statement. "Serenity," she said. "Yes, Mara?" "Fuel costs are down 15% this month. Overtime pay is down 20%. Why?" I adjusted the route clustering, I said, typing away without looking up. I grouped the deliveries by zip code density instead of order of receipt. It saves an average of 12 miles per truck per day. Mara dropped the paper on my desk. She looked at me for a long time. "You are not dumb," she said. It was the closest thing to a compliment she had ever given. "You are just untreated talent. You are a diamond in a pile of mud." "Kid?" "Thank you," I said. "Do not thank me," she grunted. "I am going to give you a raise. $2 an hour. Don't spend it all on booze." It wasn't much, but it was validation. It was proof that my mind had value, even if my last name did not. I kept my head down. I did not date. I did not make friends. I worked, I studied, and I saved. I was building a foundation. Brick by boring brick. Then came my 22nd birthday. I had almost forgotten about it. I was working late, trying to untangle a customs issue for a shipment coming from Mexico. The mailman dropped a small stack of letters on the front desk. There was a square envelope made of thick, expensive paper. The return address was embossed in gold. The Mitchell Residence, Wilmington, NC. I stared at it. My hands started to shake. Part of me, the stupid, childish part, hoped it was an apology. Maybe Graham had realized his mistake. Maybe he missed me. I opened the envelope. Inside was a generic Hallmark card. "Happy birthday, daughter," no handwritten note, no "love, Dad," just signatures at the bottom. "Graham Cynthia." And inside the card fell a check. I picked it up. It was a personal check from Graham. The amount was $50. $50. The tuition for Logan's program was $80,000 a year. He was driving a car worth $60,000, and for the daughter he had exiled, he sent $50. It was not a gift. It was a tip. It was the kind of money you give to a housekeeper you do not particularly like. I felt a heat rise in my chest, hotter than the Texas sun. It was not sadness anymore. It was pure, distilled clarity. They did not see me as a person. They saw me as a charity case they could buy off with pocket change so they could feel like good parents. I looked at the check. I looked at his signature, the jagged, arrogant scrawl of a man who thought he owned the world. I took the check in both hands. The paper was crisp. Reep. The sound was loud in the quiet office. I tore it in half, then in quarters, then into tiny, confetti-sized pieces. I walked to the trash can and let the pieces flutter down into the garbage, mixing with the coffee grounds and old receipts. "I will never beg them again," I said to the empty room. My voice was low, vibrating with a new frequency. "I will never ask for a penny. I will never ask for a favor. When I see them again, I will not be the one with the empty hand." I went back to my desk. I pulled up a new spreadsheet. I was done being the assistant. It was time to start building something of my own. I discovered my talent the way some people discover they have perfect pitch. It was not something I learned in a textbook. It was a frequency I could hear. When I looked at a spreadsheet full of shipping manifests, I did not just see rows and columns. I saw a three-dimensional map. I saw where the money was leaking. I saw where a truck was sitting idle for 40 minutes in a loading dock in Dallas, costing the company hundreds of dollars in fuel and driver time. I saw the invisible friction that slowed everything down. At Rapid Route, I started fixing things that Mara Klein did not even know were broken. I streamlined the driver shifts so that we reduced overtime by 18% in the first quarter. I renegotiated fuel contracts by analyzing the average consumption rates against the fluctuating market prices. It was exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I had control. I could move a piece on the board, and the world would respond with efficiency. But I knew I could not stay at Rapid Route forever. I was hungry. I was 24 years old, fueled by caffeine and a deep burning need to prove that I was not worthless. I started taking freelance projects on the side. I went on freelancer websites using a pseudonym. I found small businesses, a furniture maker in Austin, a medical supply distributor in San Antonio, that were bleeding money because they did not understand logistics. They were trying to manage their supply chains with whiteboards and sticky notes. I would work my shift at Rapid Route from 7 to 4. drive home to my tiny room, eat a sandwich over the sink, and then work until 2 in the morning on my laptop. I built custom routing algorithms for them. I audited their carrier contracts. My first check was for $500. When it hit my bank account, I stared at the screen for 10 minutes. It was not a gift. It was not an allowance. It was value I had created with my own mind. The $500 turned into $2,000. The $2,000 turned into $10,000. Within 6 months, I was making more money at night than I was during the day. I realized I needed a structure. I needed a shield. I went to a lawyer in downtown Austin. He was a skeptical man named Mr. Henderson who smelled of stale coffee and legal pads. I told him I wanted to incorporate. "What do you want to call it?" he asked, pen hovering over the form. I thought about it. I wanted a name that sounded established but vague. Something that sounded like old money. Safe and boring. I did not want my name on it. I did not want Mitchell anywhere near it. Astorvale Strategies, I said. And the officers? Just me, I said. But I want the ownership structure to be blind. I want a registered agent to sign everything. If someone searches the public records, I want them to find a law firm, not Serenity Mitchell. He looked at me over his glasses. That costs extra, and it requires a lot of paperwork. Why the secrecy? Are you running from the law? No, I said. I am running from my family. He paused, then nodded. He did not ask any more questions. He just wrote down the fee. It was $3,000. I paid it in cash. Astorvale Strategies was born. I quit my job at Rapid Route. Mara was disappointed, but she seemed to understand. You are too big for this garage, she told me. Go conquer the world. Just do not forget the little people. I did not conquer the world immediately. I conquered it inch by inch, from the shadows. I made a rule for myself. 0 PR, no press releases, no interviews, no company photos, no LinkedIn profile. In the age of personal branding, where every CEO was trying to be an influencer, I went in the opposite direction. I became a ghost. I knew my father. I knew Cynthia. If they saw me succeeding, they would not be proud. They would be threatened, or worse, they would try to claim it. They would tell their friends at the country club. Oh yes, Serenity is doing well. We helped her get started. They would rewrite the narrative to make themselves the architects of my success. I would not give them that satisfaction. I worked from my apartment for the first year. I lived like a monk. I reinvested every single dollar back into the company. I bought better software. I subscribed to expensive data feeds that tracked global shipping lanes in real time. When the workload became too much for one person, I hired my first employee. His name was Kevin, a 22-year-old data analyst who had been fired from a tech startup because he was too obsessive about details. I do not care if you are difficult, I told him during the interview at a coffee shop. I care if you are accurate. Can you find a 0.05% variance in this dataset? He looked at the laptop I slid across the table. I can find it in 30 seconds. You are hired, I said. We moved into a small, windowless office in an industrial park. It was not glamorous. The carpet was gray, the walls were beige, and the view was a parking lot, but it was ours. I needed someone to handle the money. I needed someone who could keep the secrets. That was when I found Owen Hart. Owen was 45. A former auditor for a major accounting firm who had burned out on the corporate ladder. He was meticulous, quiet, and wore wire-rimmed glasses that he was constantly cleaning. He came in for an interview, and I laid it all out for him. This is not a normal company, I said. We do not do marketing. We do not do sales calls. Our clients come to us by referral only, and the owner, me, does not exist on paper. You will be the face of the financials. You will sign the checks. You will deal with the banks. My name stays in the dark. Owen cleaned his glasses, inspecting them for dust. Is it illegal? It is 100% legal, I said. It is just private. He put his glasses back on. I like private. Private is usually profitable. With Owen on board, Astorvale Strategies began to accelerate. We were not just consulting anymore. We were taking over entire logistics departments for mid-sized companies. We were the fixers. If a company had a supply chain nightmare, they called us. Our big break came 18 months in. A mid-sized automotive manufacturer in Detroit was facing a crisis. A critical shipment of microchips was stuck in a port in Shanghai due to a paperwork error, and their assembly line was 48 hours away from shutting down. A shutdown would cost them $2 million a day. Their VP of operations called us on a Saturday morning. He sounded like he was about to have a heart attack. "I heard you fixed the supply chain for that medical startup in Austin," he said. "Can you help us? Send me the manifest numbers and the customs clearance codes." I said. I did not sleep for 36 hours. I sat in my office, surrounded by 3 monitors, tracking the shipment. I used every contact I had built over the last 4 years. I found a loophole in the customs expedited clearance protocol. I arranged for a private freight forwarder to physically go to the port and walk the paperwork through the office. I chartered a cargo plane that was sitting empty in Seoul to fly to Shanghai, pick up the pallets, and fly directly to Detroit. It cost them a fortune in shipping fees, but it was cheaper than shutting down the factory. The chips arrived at the factory 4 hours before the line was scheduled to stop. The VP called me, weeping with relief. "You are a magician," he said. "How did you do that?" "It is not magic," I said, my voice raspy from exhaustion. "It is just logistics." They signed a 3-year retainer contract with us the next day. The fee was 7 figures. That was the turning point. Word spread in the industry. There was a firm called Astorvale that could solve the impossible problems. We were expensive, we were secretive, and we were effective. By the time I was 29, Astorvale Strategies was generating $4 million a year in revenue. I moved out of the apartment with the thin walls. I bought a condo in downtown Austin on the 35th floor. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Colorado River. It was sleek, modern, and cold. I remember the first night I spent there. I stood by the window, holding a glass of wine. The city lights were spread out below me like a circuit board. I had done it. I had built a fortress. I bought a car, an Audi, black, understated but powerful. I bought clothes that fit perfectly, tailored suits that signaled authority, but I was still alone. I had employees, 12 of them now, but I kept a distance. I was the boss who was kind but reserved. They did not know about my family. They did not know that the reason I worked 80 hours a week was because I was terrified that if I stopped, the silence would catch up with me. I checked my bank account every day, not because I needed to, but because seeing the numbers gave me a sense of safety that my father never provided. 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. It was my armor. Owen walked into my office one Tuesday morning. The company had grown. We now occupied the entire floor of a mid-rise building. My office was glass-walled, soundproofed, a sanctuary of control. "We have a new inquiry," Owen said. He looked strange. Usually, Owen was unflappable, but today he looked hesitant. He was holding a tablet. "We have a backlog of inquiries." "Owen," I said, not looking up from my screen. "Put them on the wait list. We are not taking new clients until next quarter." "You are going to want to see this one," he said. There was something in his tone that made me pause. I stopped typing. I swiveled my chair around. "Who is it?" I asked. "It came through the general inquiry inbox 10 minutes ago," Owen said. "It is a request for a proposal. They are looking for a complete audit of their Eastern Seaboard distribution network. They are bleeding cash on their port-to-warehouse transfers." He handed me the tablet. I looked at the screen. The email was standard corporate speak. To whom it may concern. Seeking strategic partnership. Optimization of freight corridors. Then I looked at the sender. From procurement at Mitchellport and freight.com. Subject, request for proposal. Astorvale Strategies. My heart stopped. It literally felt like it skipped 2 beats. Mitchellport and Freight. My father's company. I stared at the logo in the signature block. The blue anchor. The bold, serif font that Graham had chosen 30 years ago. It was the logo that was embroidered on the polo shirts I was never allowed to wear. It was the logo on the trucks that drove past me on the highway, reminding me of the empire I was excluded from. "They do not know," I whispered. "Excuse me?" Owen asked. "They do not know who owns Astorvale," I said, looking up at him. "They think we are just another consulting firm. They have no idea it is me." "It is a big contract. Serenity," Owen said. "Based on their volume, this could be worth $500,000 a year in fees alone. Maybe more if we get a percentage of the savings." I stood up and walked to the window. My hands were shaking, just a little. Graham Mitchell was asking for my help. He did not know he was asking his worthless daughter. He was asking the faceless expert who could save his profit margins. The irony was so sharp it almost cut me. "Do we decline?" Owen asked behind me. "Conflict of interest?" I looked at my reflection in the glass. I saw the woman I had become. I saw the sharp suit, the determined eyes, the posture of someone who had built a kingdom from scraps. This was not just business. This was fate knocking on the door with a sledgehammer. I turned back to Owen. "No," I said. "We do not decline." "So we bid?" "We bid," I said. "But we do it my way. I want the contract to be ironclad. I want full access to their data. I want to see every skeleton in their closet. And Owen?" "Yes?" "My name never appears on a single document. Not one email, not one invoice. You are the point of contact, as far as they are concerned. Serenity Mitchell does not exist." Owen nodded slowly. "Understood." I looked back at the tablet. "Reply to them," I said, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time in years. "Tell them Astorvale Strategies is interested in saving them." The funeral of Evelyn Mitchell was an exercise in high society theater. It was held at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Savannah, a place of soaring spires and stained glass that turned the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of judgment. I sat in the very last pew, hidden behind a pillar and a pair of oversized sunglasses. I wore black, but not the expensive silk kind Cynthia was wearing in the front row. I wore a simple wool coat that blended into the shadows of the nave. I watched the back of my father's head. He was sitting with perfect posture, his arm draped protectively around Cynthia, while Logan sat next to them, checking his watch every 5 minutes. To the onlookers, they were the picture of a grieving dynasty. To me, they looked like actors waiting for their cue. When Graham walked up to the pulpit to deliver the eulogy, the church went silent. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, and looked out at the congregation with tear-filled eyes. "My mother," he began, his voice trembling with practiced emotion, "was the anchor of this family. She believed that no matter the storm, blood was the only thing that mattered. She taught us that family is everything, that we rise together and we fall together." I felt a taste in my mouth like rusted metal. Family is everything. This was the man who had erased his daughter because she cost too much. This was the man who had replaced his wife 2 years after she died. And now, he was using his mother's corpse to polish his reputation as a patriarch. I did not cry. Not there. I could not give them the satisfaction of seeing my grief. My grief was private. My grief was the Sunday phone calls that would never ring again. My grief was the silence in my apartment in Austin, where her voice used to fill the room. I slipped out the side door before the service ended, while the choir was singing a hymn about amazing grace. I did not go to the graveside. I did not go to the reception at the country club. I drove straight to the airport and flew back to Texas, feeling like the last tether to my childhood had finally snapped. 3 days later, my phone rang. I was in the middle of analyzing a heat map for a trucking route in the Midwest. The number was from Savannah, but it was not my father's office. "This is Serenity," I answered. "Ms. Mitchell?" a woman's voice said. It was crisp, professional, but with a warmth that caught me off guard. "My name is Natalie Pierce. I am an estate attorney with Pierce & Associates here in Savannah. I handled your grandmother's personal affairs. I stopped typing. I thought my father's firm handled all the family legal matters. They handle the Mitchell business, Natalie said. Evelyn specifically sought outside counsel for her private estate. She was very adamant about that. I need to speak with you regarding her will. You can mail it to me, I said, wary of being drawn back into the drama. I am afraid I cannot do that, Natalie said. There are specific instructions that I must deliver to you in person, and there are assets that require your immediate signature. I can fly to Austin tomorrow, or you can come here, but this cannot wait. Assets? I assumed Grandma had left me a piece of jewelry, or maybe her collection of porcelain cats. I will come to you, I said, but not to the family office, nowhere near my father. I have a private conference room at my firm, Natalie said. It is discreet. No one will know you are in the city. I flew back to Georgia the next morning. I felt like a spy in my own hometown. I took a rental car to a quiet street lined with oak trees and entered a small brick building that smelled of old paper and lavender. Natalie Pierce was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bob. She shook my hand firmly and led me into a soundproof room. She placed a thick leather binder on the table. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, Natalie said, sitting across from me. She saw everything. Even when people thought she was just watching television, she was paying attention. She was the only one who saw me, I said quietly. She knew that, Natalie said, which is why she set this up. She opened the binder. Evelyn Mitchell left the bulk of her estate to your father, Natalie said. The house, the cars, the public investments. That was expected. If she had done otherwise, it would have caused a war that she knew you were not ready to fight. I nodded. I expected nothing. However, Natalie continued, she created a separate, irrevocable trust 5 years ago. It is called the Skylark Trust. It is completely blind. The beneficiaries are not listed in any public registry. She slid a piece of paper across the table. You are the sole beneficiary of the Skylark Trust. I looked at the document. I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. Is this correct? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, Natalie said. $2 million in liquid assets, bond yields, accumulated interest, and a private insurance policy she took out 20 years ago. $2 million. It was not enough to buy the company, but it was enough to be dangerous. It was enough to ensure that I would never, ever have to worry about rent again. But that is not the main bequest, Natalie said. She turned the page. Your grandmother owned a significant block of preferred shares in Mitchell Port and Freight. These were shares left to her by your grandfather. They are not common stock. They do not trade on the open market. I knew about those shares. They were the original founder's shares. They carried weight. Graham has been trying to get her to sign these over to him for a decade, Natalie said with a small, conspiratorial smile. He thought they would automatically transfer to him upon her death through the general estate. They didn't? I asked. No, Natalie said. 3 years ago, Evelyn transferred these shares into a voting trust. A voting trust separates the financial value of the stock from the voting power. Your father gets the dividends. He gets the money the stock generates. Natalie paused, leaning forward. But the voting rights? The power to sit at the shareholder meetings? The power to cast a ballot on board appointments and CEO retention? She pointed a manicured finger at my chest. That belongs to you. The room seemed to tilt. I have voting power? I asked. You control 12% of the voting leverage of Mitchell Port and Freight, Natalie said, combined with the minority shareholders who are already unhappy with your father's recent performance. You are not just a spectator, Serenity, you are a kingmaker. I sat back in my chair. The leather creaking. 12%. It sounded small. But in a company where ownership was fractured, 12% was a sledgehammer. Why? I asked. Why didn't she tell me? Because she wanted you to build your own muscles first, Natalie said. She wanted you to learn how to stand up before she gave you a weapon. She reached into the pocket of the binder and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was handwritten, to Serenity. She wrote this the week before she passed, Natalie said softly. I will give you a moment. She stood up and left the room, closing the door behind her. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. The handwriting was shaky, the ink a little smeared, but I could hear her voice in every loop of the letters. My dearest granddaughter, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are likely sitting in a lawyer's office looking terrified. Don't be. I have watched you these last 14 years. I watched you leave when they broke your heart. I watched you struggle. I watched you rise. You think I didn't know about the night classes? You think I didn't know you were the one fixing the supply chains in this town? I have my sources. Your father is a builder of monuments, but he is a breaker of people. I loved him because he was my son, but I did not like him very much as a man. I could not change him. Serenity, I tried, but a mother cannot force a man to see what he refuses to look at. So, I decided to change your options. The money is for your freedom. The shares are for your justice. Do not use them out of anger. Anger burns out. Use them out of necessity. Use them to make sure that no one ever makes you feel small again. You were never invisible to me. You were just waiting for your turn in the light. Now, go take it. Love, Grandma. The tears came then. They did not come as a flood of hysteria. They came as a slow, hot release. I put my head down on the cool mahogany table and wept. I wept for the 9-year-old girl who signed her own permission slips. I wept for the college student who sold her books to buy a bus ticket. I wept because, for the first time in my life, I realized I had not been fighting alone. She had been there, in the background, quietly arming me for the final battle. I cried for 10 minutes. Then I wiped my face, drank the glass of water Natalie had left, and stood up. When Natalie came back in, I was dry-eyed. Are you okay? She asked. I am ready, I said. We spent the next 2 hours going over the strategy. I did not want the money to sit in a bank account. I wanted it to work. Transfer $1 million into Astorvale's operating capital, I instructed. I want to upgrade our server capacity and hire 3 more senior analysts. We are going to scale up. And the rest? Natalie asked, taking notes. Put $500,000 into a legal defense fund, I said. Retain the best corporate litigators in the state. If my father finds out about this trust, he will sue. He will try to claim undue influence. I want to be ready to bury him in paperwork. Smart, Natalie said. And the voting trust? Keep it dormant, I said. For now, I do not want to trigger a shareholder alert. Let Graham think he owns the room. Let Logan think he is the heir apparent, if I reveal this now. They will circle the wagons. I need them to be confident. I need them to be careless. Natalie looked at me with respect. You really are not the girl they talk about, are you? I never was, I said. One warning. Serenity, Natalie said, closing the binder. Anonymity cannot last forever. You are entering into a contract with your father's company through Astorvale. You are holding his voting shares through this trust. Eventually, the streams are going to cross. They will trace the money. They will trace the IP address. They will find you. I know, I said. I do not want to hide forever. I just want to choose the moment I am found. And what is the end game? She asked. Is it revenge? Do you want to bankrupt him? I thought about Graham's face at the funeral. I thought about the way he looked at Logan with pride and at me with nothing. No, I said. Revenge is messy. Revenge is emotional. If I bankrupt him, I destroy the livelihood of 200 employees who have done nothing to me. I do not want to burn the house down. Natalie. I looked her in the eye. I just want to evict the squatters. Natalie smiled. She opened the trust document to the very last page. It was a section filled with dense legal jargon. Then you should know about this clause, she said, tapping the paper with her pen. Section 14, paragraph B. I leaned in to read it. In the event of gross mismanagement, fiscal irresponsibility, or actions deemed harmful to the reputation of the company, the voting trustee has the unilateral right to call an emergency extraordinary general meeting of the board. What does this mean in plain English? I asked. It means, Natalie said, her voice dropping to a whisper, that if they force your hand, you do not have to wait for the annual meeting in December. You can call a meeting whenever you want. You can drag them into a boardroom and force a vote on the leadership within 48 hours. I stared at the clause. It was not just a shield, it was a trapdoor. It is the nuclear option, Natalie said. Once you push this button, there is no going back. It is open war. I ran my finger over the text. Emergency Extraordinary General Meeting. I understand, I said. I signed the documents. My signature was firm, darker than usual. Grandma gave me a scalpel, I said, handing the pen back to Natalie. I intend to use it like a surgeon. I will cut out the rot, but I will save the patient. I walked out of the law office and into the Savannah heat. The sun was setting, casting long, sharp shadows across the pavement. I checked my phone. There was a message from Owen. Update. Mitchell Port and Freight accepted our proposal. They sent over the data files. Serenity. It is worse than we thought. Their financials are a disaster. I typed back. Good. Let them bleed a little longer. We start the audit on Monday. I got into my rental car and looked in the mirror. The uneducated girl was gone. The worthless daughter was dead. I put the car in drive. I had a ghost company to run. And now, I had a ghost army to back me up. The ink on the contract between Mitchell Port and Freight and Astorvale Strategies was dry, but the irony was still wet. We had signed a 6-month preliminary engagement. It was a standard vendor agreement, buried under layers of corporate bureaucracy, to my father's company. Astorvale was just a high-end boutique firm based in Austin, Texas, with a reputation for surgical efficiency and a suspiciously low public profile. To me, it was a lifeline I was throwing to a drowning man who had pushed me off the boat. We did not meet in person. My team handled the onboarding via video calls where cameras were conveniently turned off or focused on slide decks. Owen Hart acted as the primary interface. He was the voice they trusted. He was the calm, seasoned professional who translated their panic into actionable data. I was the ghost in the machine. I was the architect pulling the levers behind the curtain, watching my father's empire function only because I allowed it to. 3 months into the contract, the results were undeniable. We had rerouted their entire southeastern distribution network. We had cut their idle time at the port of Savannah by 30%. We had renegotiated their third-party carrier rates, saving them nearly $400,000 a month in pure overhead. The numbers were staggering, and Graham Mitchell loved numbers. I decided to attend the Southeastern Logistics Summit in Atlanta. It was a massive industry event, the kind where deals were made over shrimp cocktails and lukewarm white wine. I did not go as Serenity Mitchell, the daughter. I registered as S. Mitchell, Strategy Consultant, a generic title that rendered me invisible in a room full of vice presidents and directors. I wore a sharp navy suit and glasses with thick black frames that changed the shape of my face just enough. I stood near a pillar in the grand ballroom, nursing a sparkling water, watching the crowd. It did not take long to find them. Graham was standing near the center of the room, holding court. He looked vibrant. Success always made him look 10 years younger. He was laughing with the CEO of a major trucking fleet, a man named Henderson, whom I knew by reputation. I moved closer, turning my back to them and pretending to study a brochure on warehouse automation, letting their voices drift over my shoulder. I have to tell you, Graham, Henderson was saying, his voice booming, your quarterly report was impressive. Everyone thought you were going to take a hit with the fuel surcharges, but your margins actually went up. How did you manage that? I waited, my heart hammered against my ribs. Well, Graham said, his voice smooth and confident, we decided it was time to modernize. We brought in a specialized firm, Astorvale Strategies. Have you heard of them? I have seen the name, Henderson said. Expensive, from what I hear. Worth every penny, Graham declared. They are absolute wizards. They looked at our routing tables and found inefficiencies we did not even know existed. They saved us $2 million in the first quarter alone. It is the best strategic move I have made in a decade. I gripped the brochure tighter. He was praising me. He was standing there, in his $3,000 suit, bragging about my mind. He was taking credit for my work, calling it his strategic move, but the praise was for the intellect he had called worthless. That is great leadership, Dad, a voice chimed in. Logan, I risked a glance. Logan was standing next to Graham, swirling a glass of bourbon. He looked polished, but there was a softness to his face, the look of a man who had never really been tested. I told the procurement team to push the deal through, Logan said, puffing out his chest. I had a feeling about them. You have to trust your gut in this business, right? I almost laughed out loud. It would have been a bitter, jagged sound. Logan had not vetted us. In fact, according to the email logs I had read, Logan had actually flagged our proposal as too expensive and tried to pivot to a cheaper, inferior firm owned by one of his fraternity brothers. Owen had to override him by going straight to the CFO, but here he was, rewriting history. That is my boy, Graham said, clapping Logan on the shoulder. He has the eye for talent. That is why he is taking over next month. The praise curdled in my stomach. They were celebrating a victory they had not earned, built by a woman they did not see. It was a perfect, sealed loop of delusion. I walked away. I could not listen to another word without screaming. I went to the hotel bar, ordered a double espresso, and stared at the dark liquid. You look like you want to break something, a voice said. I looked up. It was Owen. He had driven in for the day to meet with some other clients. He slid onto the stool next to me. I just heard my father tell the CEO of Transglobal that hiring us was his idea, I said. And Logan claimed he vetted us. Owen sighed, loosening his tie. That is how it works. Serenity. You sell the shovel. They dig the hole, and they claim they found the gold. It is not about the credit, I said. It is about the blindness. They are surviving because of me, literally. If we turned off the servers tomorrow, their trucks would be driving in circles. Owen's expression turned serious. He swiveled his stool to face me. That is what I wanted to talk to you about, he said. What is it? The renewal, Owen said. The 6-month pilot ends in 3 weeks. We have become structurally integral to their operation. We are handling 60% of their dispatch logic. If we pull out now, if we decline the renewal. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. They crash, I said. They do not just crash, Owen corrected. They implode. Their internal team has been downsized because we took over the workload. They do not have the manpower to go back to manual routing. If Astorvale walks away, Mitchell Port and Freight misses deliveries, they breach contracts, their stock tanks, it would be a catastrophe. I looked at my reflection in the polished bar counter. This was the leverage Grandma Evelyn had talked about. I held the kill switch in my hand. I could legally, ethically just decline the contract. I could say we were pivoting direction, or at capacity. I could walk away, and within a month, the company that Graham built would be on its knees. It would be poetic justice. It would be the ultimate revenge for the tuition they stole, the phone calls they ignored, the birthday check I tore up. But then I thought about the drivers. I thought about the warehouse workers in Savannah who made $20 an hour and had kids to feed. I thought about the receptionist, Mrs. Higgins, who had given me peppermint candies when I was a little girl waiting in the lobby. If the company crashed, Graham would be fine. He had golden parachutes. He had offshore accounts. The people who would suffer were the ones who had no safety net. I do not want them to collapse, I said softly. Are you sure? Owen asked. Because they treated you like garbage. Serenity. I know, I said, but I'm not them. I do not destroy things just because I can. I build things. I took a sip of espresso. Draft the renewal, I said. But make it expensive. Raise our fees by 20%. If they want the best, they pay for the best. Owen nodded, a look of relief crossing his face. You are a better person than I am. No, I said. I just want them to stop stepping on me. I want to own the ground they walk on. A week later, the invitation arrived. It came via FedEx, in a thick, padded envelope. Inside was a heavy card made of cream-colored stock with gold-embossed lettering. It smelled of expensive ink and old money. You are cordially invited to the retirement celebration of Graham Mitchell. Seabrook Harbor Club, black tie. I held the card. It felt heavy, like a brick. Why invite me? I had not spoken to Graham since the tuition meeting in his study. I had not spoken to Cynthia or Logan in years. We were strangers who shared a last name. I knew why. It was for the show. A retirement party was a coronation. It was a night for Graham to display his legacy. A missing daughter was a flaw in the portrait. It raised questions. Where is Serenity? Is there trouble in paradise? He needed me there as a prop. He needed me to smile, to nod, to look like the grateful, slightly disappointing daughter who was happy to be included in the orbit of his greatness. It validated his narrative. See, even the one who failed is still welcomed home by the benevolent patriarch. I tossed the invitation onto my desk. It slid across the glass surface and stopped next to my laptop. Owen walked in a few minutes later with the renewal contracts. He saw the invitation. Are you going? He asked. I do not know, I said. It is a trap, Owen said bluntly. You know that, right? They will parade you around. They will make backhanded compliments. They will try to make you feel small so they can feel big. I know. Then why consider it? I stood up and walked to the window of my office, looking out at the Austin skyline. Because hiding feels like losing, I said. I have spent 14 years building this armor. I have money. I have power. I have the voting trust. But I'm still scared of walking into a room with them. I turned back to him. I need to know if the fear is real, I said. I need to look him in the eye and see if I still feel like that little girl in the hallway. And I want to see... See what? I want to see if they are capable of being human. I said, just for one night, I want to see if, at the end of his career, with nothing left to prove, my father can look at me and just see his daughter. Owen looked skeptical. And if he doesn't? Then I know, I said. Then I know that there is nothing left to save. I will have the plane ready, Owen said. But Serenity? Keep your guard up. These people do not change. They just get older. I flew to Savannah on the day of the party. I did not stay at the house. I stayed at a boutique hotel downtown. I spent 3 hours getting ready. I hired a professional makeup artist. I wore the black dress I had bought in Paris. Simple, structural, devastatingly elegant. I wore my grandmother's diamond earrings, the only thing she had given me directly before she died. I drove myself to the Seabrook Harbor Club. The driveway was lined with Bentleys and Mercedes. The valet looked at my rental car with mild disdain until I tipped him $50. I walked up the grand staircase. My heart was beating a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. You are the CEO of Astorvale Strategies. I told myself, you own 12% of this company. You are not a guest. You are a landlord inspecting the property. I reached the check-in table. A young woman with a headset smiled brightly. Name, please? Serenity Mitchell, I said. She scanned her list. Her finger scrolled down, past the VIPs, past the family section, past the corporate partners. Ah, here we are, she said. Table 42. She handed me a small card. I looked at the seating chart displayed on an easel nearby. Table 1 was the head table. Graham, Cynthia, Logan, the governor. Tables 2 through 10 were the board of directors and major investors. Tables 11 through 20 were senior management. I scanned the room diagram. Table 42. It was in the back corner. By the service entrance, next to the swinging doors where the waiters brought out the dirty dishes, It was the table reserved for the distant cousins, the former secretaries, and the people who were invited out of obligation but not desire. It was a statement. It was a geographical insult. They were telling me, before I even opened my mouth, exactly where I stood. I was not family. I was the help. I was the afterthought. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It was not a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a judge who has just seen the defendant incriminate himself. "Thank you," I said to the woman. I took the card. I did not shrink. I did not turn around and run. I walked into the ballroom. The air was cold. The chandeliers were bright, and as I walked toward the back of the room, past the people who thought they were better than me, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had come to see if they would choose to be human. They had chosen to be a knife, and I was done bleeding. The morning after the party, I expected silence. I expected the kind of heavy, awkward distance that usually follows a public scene. I thought Graham would be too proud to reach out and Cynthia would be too busy spinning the narrative to the country club set to bother with me. I was wrong. I did not get silence. I got a diagnosis. It started at 7 in the morning. My phone buzzed on the nightstand of my hotel room. It was a text from an aunt I had not spoken to in 6 years, a woman who lived in Charleston and usually only communicated via Christmas cards signed by her secretary. "Dearest Serenity, we heard about your episode last night. We are all so worried about your mental state. Please let us know if you need a recommendation for a specialist. We are praying for you." I stared at the screen, the blue light stinging my eyes. Episode. They were not apologizing for the insults. They were not ashamed that Graham had mocked me in front of 300 people. They were rewriting the script, in their version. Graham was the benevolent patriarch who had been interrupted by a hysterical, unstable daughter. I was not a victim of emotional cruelty. I was a mental health crisis waiting to happen. It was brilliant. It was evil. But it was brilliant. If I was crazy, then nothing I said mattered. If I was unwell, then Graham's cruelty was just tough love. By 9 in the morning, I had received 12 messages. They were all variations on the same theme. Cousins, family friends, even a former neighbor. So concerned. "Here for you. Do not let the stress break you." They were gaslighting me by committee. I threw the phone onto the duvet and walked to the window. The Savannah sun was bright and uncaring. I felt a cold knot of paranoia tighten in my chest. This was how they won. They did not fight you with facts. They fought you with reputation. They isolated you until you started to believe their version of reality. I needed to leave. I needed to get back to Austin, back to my glass tower, back to the world where I was a CEO, not a patient. I packed my bag in 10 minutes. As I was zipping up my suitcase, my phone rang again. I almost ignored it, but the number was local. And it was not a family member. It was Marcus Vance, a supply chain director for a mid-sized shipping firm in Georgia. We had done business with him 2 years ago under the Astorvale banner. I hesitated, then picked up. "This is Serenity," I said, my voice tight. "Serenity," Marcus said. He sounded uncomfortable. "Look, I probably should not be making this call, but I owe you for that optimization project in 2024. "What is it, Marcus?" "I was at the club last night," he said. "I saw what happened. Brutal stuff." "I am sure it was entertaining," I said dryly. "That is not why I'm calling," he said. "Listen, Graham Mitchell is on the warpath this morning. He is humiliated. And when Graham is humiliated, he looks for someone to punish. I heard him talking to his legal team in the locker room this morning." My grip on the phone tightened. "And?" "He is asking questions about Astorvale," Marcus said. "He is digging. He was asking if anyone knew who the actual partners were. He said something about vendors taking advantage of the family. He is suspicious. Serenity. He does not know it is you yet, but he senses a connection. He thinks maybe you are dating someone at the firm, or that you leaked information to them." "Thank you, Marcus," I said. "I appreciate the warning." "Watch your back," he said. "He is looking for a lawsuit. He wants to sue someone just to prove he still has teeth. I hung up. The paranoia was no longer just a feeling. It was a fact. They were hunting. Graham could not accept that I had walked away. He needed a villain. If he couldn't control me, he wanted to destroy the things I was connected to. I checked out of the hotel and drove to the airport. I did not breathe easily until the plane wheels lifted off the Georgia tarmac. When I landed in Austin, the heat was waiting for me, dry and familiar. I went straight to the office. It was a Sunday, but I knew Owen would be there. I walked in, dragging my suitcase. The office was quiet. The hum of the servers the only sound. Owen was in his office, staring at a spread of documents. He looked up as I entered, his face grim. "You saw the texts?" I asked. "I saw the email from your stepmother," Owen said. He turned his monitor so I could see it. It was an email sent to my personal address, but because Owen monitored my security, he had seen it first. Subject: Dinner for 4. From Cynthia Price. Mitchell Serenity. Darling, Graham is willing to overlook your outburst. We know you are struggling. We want to help. Come to dinner next Friday. Just the 4 of us. We need to discuss your future and perhaps find you some professional support. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. Whatever you are planning, don't. We have lawyers. Sweetie, you have a sedate life. Let's keep it that way. Whatever you are planning, don't. It was a threat wrapped in cashmere. They thought I was planning a lawsuit for defamation. They thought I was going to write a tell-all book. They had no idea I was holding the detonator to their entire logistics network. She thinks I am weak, I said, reading the email again. She thinks I am the same girl who sat at her table and ate her overcooked roast for 10 years. What do you want to do? Owen asked. The contract renewal is on my desk. It is ready to go. Burn it, I said. Owen blinked. Burn it? We are not renewing, I said. And we are not just letting it expire. We are terminating, effective in 30 days. Serenity, Owen said, his voice cautious. If we terminate without cause, they can sue us for breach of operational continuity. They have a clause that says we cannot leave them high and dry without a transition period. I am not leaving them high and dry, I said. I am leaving them exactly as they were before I saved them. And as for the cause, I am going to see Natalie Pierce. I called Natalie immediately. She was in her office, even on a Sunday. Lawyers like Natalie did not take days off. They billed them. I drove to her firm. We sat in the same conference room where I had learned about the trust. I showed her the texts. I showed her the email from Cynthia. I told her about the call from Marcus. They are building a case to declare me mentally incompetent, I said. Or at least to paint me as unstable so that if I try to use the voting trust later, they can challenge my capacity. Natalie nodded, her eyes sharp. Standard tactic: discredit the witness before they take the stand. So, what is your move? I want to terminate the Astorvale contract, I said. Immediately, but I want it to be clean. I do not want to give them a single inch of legal ground to stand on. Natalie pulled out a file. She put on her glasses and scanned the original agreement we had signed with Mitchell Port and Freight. Clause 17, she said, tapping the paper. Vendor reserves the right to terminate services with 30 days' notice in the event of a conflict of interest or a strategic restructuring of the client portfolio. Strategic restructuring, I repeated. I like that. It is vague enough to be defensible, but specific enough to be legal, Natalie said. You send them a formal notice. You state that Astorvale Strategies is realigning its long-term goals and Mitchell Port and Freight no longer fits the client profile. You offer a 30-day offboarding period to transfer data. You offer to hand over the keys to the routing system, which they do not know how to drive, I said. That is not your problem, Natalie said. Legally, you are fulfilling your obligation. You are giving them the car back. The fact that they cannot drive stick shift is not a breach of contract. She looked at me over her glasses. But Serenity, she warned, You have the right to end this. But how you end this will define you. If you do this, you are not just a vendor walking away. You are pulling the life support plug. They will panic, and when people panic, they get dangerous. They are already dangerous, I said. They have been dangerous to me since I was 9 years old. They just use silence instead of bullets. Okay, Natalie said. We draft the notice, 30 days, but you need to be ready for the fallout. Once you send this, the anonymity is going to crack. They will come for Astorvale with subpoenas. I am ready, I said. I went back to the office. Owen was waiting. Draft the letter, I told him. Standard corporate letterhead. Cold, professional, no emotion. Due to a strategic restructuring of our client portfolio, Astorvale Strategies will be discontinuing service effective 30 days from today. Attach the transition plan. Owen typed it out. The sound of the keys clacking was the only sound in the room. Do I sign it? Owen asked. Yes, I said. You are the CFO. It comes from you. Owen printed the letter. He signed it with his blue fountain pen. It looked so ordinary. It was just a piece of paper, but it was a declaration of war. Now, I said, sitting down at my own desk. I have one more letter to write. To whom? To Graham. I pulled out a sheet of plain white paper. I did not use the Astorvale letterhead. I did not use my personal stationery. I wanted this to be raw. I picked up a pen. My hand hovered over the paper for a long moment. I thought about the joke at the party. I thought about the family meeting where they stole my tuition. I thought about the birthday check I had torn up. I wrote, Graham, you asked for an apology. I cannot give you one, because I am not sorry. You called me worthless. You called me uneducated. You told 300 people that I exist on your charity. The truth is, I have not needed you for a very long time. The check you send every month? I shredded the first one 7 years ago, and I have shredded every single one since. You think you can rewrite me as the crazy daughter to save your pride? You think you can bully me into silence with dinner invitations and threats? But you cannot edit reality. I am not the girl you ignored in the hallway anymore. I am not the problem you can manage. I am done being your punchline. I am done being your ghost. Do not contact me again. Do not send Cynthia to fix it. Do not send Logan to threaten me. If you cross the line, remember that I know more about your world than you think I do. Goodbye. Serenity. I folded the letter. I did not include a return address. We need a defense file, I said to Owen. If they try to sue Astorvale, or if they try to come after me personally, I want everything ready. We spent the next 4 hours building the file. We printed every email where Logan had ignored our safety warnings. We printed the audit log showing how much money we had saved them. We printed the proof of ownership showing that I, Serenity Mitchell, was the sole proprietor of Astorvale Strategies. We printed the transcripts of the calls where their own procurement officers admitted their internal teams were incompetent. We put it all in a thick red folder. I labeled it, In case of emergency. This stays here, I said, locking it in the safe. We only use this if they lie. They will lie, Owen said. It was 5 p.m. The sun was beginning to dip low over the Texas hills. Send it, I said. The termination notice? And the personal letter, I said. Send them via courier. Priority overnight. I want them to arrive at the same time. I want him to read my letter while his VP of operations is reading yours. Owen nodded. He called the courier service. A man in a uniform arrived 20 minutes later. He took the 2 envelopes, one addressed to Graham Mitchell, personal, one addressed to the VP of operations, Mitchell Port and Freight. Delivery by 9 a.m. tomorrow, the courier said. I watched him leave. I went home to my condo. I poured a glass of wine and sat on my balcony. I did not sleep. I watched the city lights and waited for the sun to come up over Georgia. At 8:50 a.m. Central Standard Time, which was 9:50 a.m. in Savannah, my phone chimed. It was a notification from the courier app. Package delivered. Signed for by D. Vance, executive assistant, Darla, my father's assistant. She would open the mail. She would put the personal letter on Graham's desk. And down the hall, the VP of Operations would be opening the Astorvale envelope. I took a sip of coffee. It was cold. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. I imagined the scene. The VP reading the letter, the blood draining from his face, the scramble to the phone, the call to Graham. Astorvale is firing us. Graham looking at the letter from his daughter. I am done. The realization hitting him from 2 directions at once, the business failure and the personal rejection. My phone screen lit up. It was not a text this time. It was a call. Caller ID. Graham Mitchell. I let it ring. It stopped. Then it rang again immediately. Caller ID. Graham Mitchell. I silenced it. Then another call. Caller ID. Cynthia Price Mitchell. Then another. Caller ID. Logan Price. Then the office line forwarded to my cell. Caller ID. Mitchell Port Freight. Main switchboard. My phone was vibrating so hard it was dancing across the glass table. It sounded like a swarm of angry bees. They were panic dialing. They were realizing that the ground had just opened up beneath their feet. I looked at the chaos on the screen. Hello, Dad? I whispered to the vibrating phone. Do you see me now? I reached out and turned the phone off. The screen went black. The silence returned. But this time, it was not the silence of being ignored. It was the silence of the person holding the remote control. I stood up. I had to get dressed. I had a feeling I was going to have visitors very soon. It took them exactly 48 hours to arrive. I was sitting in my office on the 35th floor, reviewing the weekly efficiency reports with my lead analyst, when the intercom on my desk buzzed. It was the receptionist, Sarah. Her voice was usually cheerful, a bright chirp in the quiet hum of our operations, but today it was tight and low. Ms. Mitchell, she said, there are 3 people here to see you. They do not have an appointment, but they are insisting, loudly. I did not have to ask who they were. I could feel their presence in the building like a change in air pressure. They had flown private. They had probably landed at the executive airport an hour ago, rented a luxury SUV, and driven straight here. Fueled by panic and the kind of entitlement that believes doors should simply open because they are standing in front of them. Let them in, Sarah, I said calmly, but tell them they have 10 minutes. I looked at my analyst. Leave us, please, but keep the blinds open. He gathered his tablet and left. I stood up and walked to the wall of glass that separated my office from the main floor. I could see the elevator doors slide open. Graham led the way. He was wearing a charcoal suit, but his tie was slightly askew. A detail so uncharacteristic it looked like a wound. Cynthia was a step behind him, wearing oversized sunglasses inside the building, clutching her Hermes bag like a shield. And trailing them was Logan, his face flushed a blotchy red, looking less like a CEO designate and more like a fraternity brother who had just been told the keg was empty. They marched through the bullpen of open desks, my employees, 30 brilliant data scientists, logistics experts, and coders, stopped typing. They watched. They saw the anger in Graham's walk. They saw the fear in Logan's eyes. I opened the door to the main conference room. It was a fishbowl. 4 walls of floor-to-ceiling glass. It was soundproof, so no one could hear the screaming, but it was transparent, so everyone could see the behavior. I stood at the head of the table. I did not offer them water. I did not offer them a seat. Graham stormed in first. He slammed a piece of paper onto the sleek glass table. It was the termination letter Owen had sent. "This is a misunderstanding," he announced. His voice was loud, projected for an audience that wasn't there. "You need to fix this. Serenity, right now." "Hello, Dad," I said. "Hello, Cynthia, Logan." "Cut the pleasantries," Logan snapped, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. "Do you have any idea what you have done? Our stock dropped 4% this morning just on the rumor that Astorvale was pulling out. If this goes public, We are looking at a liquidity crisis. I am aware of the market implications, I said. I monitored the ticker this morning. Then call them, Cynthia hissed, taking off her sunglasses to reveal eyes that were puffy and rimmed with red. Call your friends at this company. Call the partners. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you were emotional. Tell them whatever you have to tell them to rescind this letter. I looked at them. They still did not get it. They thought I was the disgruntled daughter who had whispered in someone's ear. They thought I was using influence I did not have to sabotage them. I cannot call the partners. Cynthia, I said. Why not? Graham demanded. Did you sign a non-compete? Did they fire you too? Is that what this is? You got fired. So you decided to burn the bridge on your way out? No, I said. I cannot call the partners because there are no partners. I reached into the leather portfolio on the table. I pulled out a single document. It was the Certificate of Formation for Astorvale Strategies, filed in the state of Texas 4 years ago. It listed the registered agent, the business address, and the sole member and managing director. I slid it across the glass table. It stopped directly in front of Graham. Read the bottom line, I said. Graham looked down. He put on his reading glasses, his hands shaking slightly. He read the text. He blinked. He read it again. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lung. Graham looked up. The color had drained from his face, leaving it the color of old parchment. He looked at me, then back at the paper, then at me again. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a terrifying confusion. You? He whispered. Me, I said. What does it say? Logan demanded. Grabbing the paper from his father's hand, he scanned it. His mouth fell open. This is fake. This is impossible. You built this? Astorvale is a $10 million consultancy firm. You were selling used textbooks 5 years ago. I was building a company 5 years ago, I corrected, while you were failing your economics classes. Logan? Cynthia sank into one of the chairs. She looked as if she had been struck. You own it? All of it? 100%, I said. Every algorithm, every contract, every employee you walked past on your way in, they work for me, the uneducated girl, the worthless daughter. You deceived us, Graham said. His voice was rising again, trying to find footing on the moral high ground. You tricked us into signing a contract. You acted in bad faith. I acted in business, I said. I provided a service you desperately needed, a service you praised publicly. You called Astorvale wizards, remember? You said we saved you millions. The only thing that has changed is that now you know the wizard is the daughter you threw away. You cannot do this, Logan shouted. He slammed his hand on the table. Outside the glass, 3 of my analysts stood up, ready to intervene. I held up a hand to signal I was okay. You cannot just shut us off, Logan continued, spittle flying from his lips. We have 200 employees. We have drivers. If you terminate the routing system, the whole fleet goes dark. People will lose their jobs. You are not hurting Dad. You are hurting innocent families. Do not lecture me on innocent families. Logan, I said. My voice was cold, sharp as a razor. You are the one who spent $80,000 of my tuition money on a degree you barely used. You are the one who drives a Porsche while your warehouse staff hasn't had a raise in 3 years. I turned to Graham. You built dependence, I said. You outsourced your brain to a vendor because it was easier than fixing your own internal problems. That is not my crime. That is your negligence. Serenity, Graham said. His tone shifted. It softened. It became the voice of the negotiator, the deal maker. Okay, you made your point. You proved us wrong. You are smart. You are capable. We see that now. He walked around the table, approaching me. He reached out a hand, but I took a step back. I am sorry about the party, Graham said. I was stressed. I had a few drinks. It was a bad joke. I should not have said it. I apologize. There, I said it. I am sorry. He looked at me expectantly. as if he had just deposited a coin into a vending machine and was waiting for the product to drop. "Now," he said, gesturing to the termination letter. "Let's tear this up. Let's renegotiate. We will pay you more. We will give you a seat on the board. We can announce it. A partnership. Mitchell and daughter. How does that sound?" I looked at him with genuine pity. He really thought everything was a transaction. He thought an apology was just a currency you spent to buy your way out of trouble. "That is not an apology, Graham," I said. "That is a purchase order." "It is what you want," he exclaimed. "You want recognition? You got it. You want respect? We are giving it to you." "I do not want your respect," I said. "I have my own—" "Then what do you want?" Cynthia cried from her chair. "Do you want to destroy us? Is that it? Is this revenge for the tuition? For the house? Fine. Take the money. We will write you a check for the tuition, with interest. Just stop this." "It is not about the money," I said. Logan stepped forward. His face was twisted into a sneer. The fear was gone, replaced by the ugly, defensive aggression of a man who knows he is outmatched. "You listen to me," Logan growled. "You are going to rescind that termination notice. If you do not, I will sue you for every dime you have. I will sue you for fraud. I will sue you for breach of contract. I have friends in the state legislature. I have friends in the press. I will paint you as a vindictive, unstable woman who entrapped her own family. I will ruin this little company of yours." The room went silent. I looked at Logan. I looked at the veins bulging in his neck. "Are you threatening me, Logan?" I asked softly. "I am promising you," he said. "You think you have leverage? We have the Mitchell name, in Georgia. That still means something." I walked over to the sideboard. I picked up the red folder that Owen and I had prepared the night before. In case of emergency, I opened it. I pulled out a single stapled document. It was an internal audit log from the Mitchell port and freight server, access we had been granted as part of our optimization contract. "Do you recognize this?" I asked, holding it up. Logan squinted. "What is that?" "It is the authorization log for the Project Beta automation upgrade," I said. "The one you insisted on buying last year. The one that cost the company $2 million and never worked." Logan paled. "That was a vendor failure. We are in litigation." "No," I said. "It was not a vendor failure. This log shows that on November 14th, you received a critical risk warning from your own IT director. He told you the software was incompatible with your legacy systems. He told you it would fail. He recommended canceling the purchase." I turned the page. "And this," I said, pointing to a signature, "is you overriding him. You signed the purchase order anyway. Why? Because the vendor, Nexus Tech, is owned by your college roommate. You pushed a $2 million contract to your friend, knowing it would fail, and then you wrote it off as a loss to get the tax deduction." Logan froze. He looked like a statue made of ash. Graham turned to his son. "Logan, is this true?" "She is lying," Logan stammered. "She forged it." "I have the digital timestamps," I said calmly. "I have the emails. I have the bank transfer records." I placed the file on the table. "This is corporate malfeasance. Logan, it is a breach of fiduciary duty. If the shareholders saw this, if the board of directors saw this, you would not just be fired. You would be facing criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud." Cynthia gasped. Covering her mouth with her hand, Graham looked at his son with a mixture of horror and realization. He was seeing the future of the company for what he really was, a liability. "I have not released this," I said. "It is sitting in a safe. It is not in the termination letter. It is not in the transition plan. I kept it private because, despite everything, I did not want to see you in handcuffs." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the glass table. "But if you threaten me again," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that filled the room, "if you try to sue me, if you try to use your friends to smear my name, or if you ever call me worthless again, I will open this file. I will send it to the board. I will send it to the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I will send it to the press. Logan slumped against the wall. He looked defeated. He looked small. So here is how this is going to work, I said. You are going to walk out of here. You are going to accept the termination notice. You are going to tell your board that we parted ways amicably due to a strategic shift, and then you are going to figure out how to run your own company without my help. Serenity, Graham said, his voice broken. Please, we cannot do it. We don't have the infrastructure. Then you better start building it, I said. You have 30 days. I walked to the door and opened it. Get out of my office. Graham looked at me one last time. He looked at the daughter he had ignored, the girl he had erased, and he saw the stranger who had just beaten him at his own game. He did not say a word. He took Cynthia's arm, signaled to a shell-shocked Logan, and they walked out. I watched them go. I watched them get into the elevator, the doors closed, sealing them away. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 14 years. My legs felt weak. I sat down in one of the chairs. The adrenaline crashing out of my system. I had done it. I had faced them. I had won. But the silence in the room felt heavy. It was over. But it didn't feel finished. I had stopped the bleeding, but the wound was still there. My phone rang. It was sitting on the table where I had left it. I picked it up, expecting it to be Owen, or maybe Natalie Pierce checking in. I looked at the screen. It was a number I did not recognize. Area code 704, North Carolina. I frowned. I didn't know anyone in North Carolina anymore. I tapped the green button. This is Serenity, I said. Is this Serenity Mitchell? A man's voice. It was rough, gravelly, sounding like it had been dragged through smoke and whiskey, but there was something familiar in the cadence, a specific Mitchell drawl. Yes, I said. Who is this? You probably do not remember me, the voice said. I have not seen you since you were in pigtails. But I saw the news. Or rather, I heard the rumors coming out of Savannah about a shakeup at the port. I hesitated. Who is this? My name is Reed, the man said. Reed Mitchell. I am your father's brother. My breath caught. Uncle Reed, the black sheep, the one who had disappeared 20 years ago. The one Graham never spoke about, except to say he was a failure and a drunk. Uncle Reed? I whispered. I thought you were dead. Not yet. Kid, he laughed. A dry, hacking sound. Though your daddy surely wishes I was. Listen to me. Serenity, I know what you are doing. I know you are fighting him. I am just protecting myself, I said. Good, Reed said. But you are fighting with one hand tied behind your back. You think you know why Graham treated you that way? You think it was just because you were a girl? Or because of Cynthia? What do you mean? I mean there is a reason he cut you off, Reed said. There is a reason he told you there was no money for college. It wasn't because he was broke. It was because he was hiding something. Hiding what? I asked, gripping the phone. A fund, Reed said. A secret fund. Your mother set it up before she died. She didn't trust him either. She left you money. Serenity. Real money. For your education. For your life. My mother left me money? I felt the room spin. But Graham said... Graham lied, Reed said. He stole it. Serenity. He took every dime of your mother's legacy and he poured it into that damn company. And worse, he used it to pay for Logan's first car. I stood up. The glass walls of the conference room seemed to vibrate. How do you know this? I asked. Because I helped him hide the paperwork, Reed said. And I have felt guilty about it for 20 years. If you really want to end him, you need to see what I have in my safe. The voice on the other end of the line was rough, like gravel crunching under tires, but it carried a specific, undeniable cadence. It was the Mitchell drawl, that slow southern rhythm that sounded like molasses pouring over a jagged rock. Uncle Reed, I repeated, sinking back into my chair. The glass walls of the conference room felt like they were vibrating from the tension of the last hour. "I have not seen you since I was 10 years old." "That was by design." "Serenity," Reed said. "Graham made sure of that. He told everyone I was a drunk and a liability. He scrubbed me out of the family portrait, just like he tried to scrub you out." "Why are you calling me now?" I asked. "How did you even get this number?" "I have been watching," Reed said. "I still have friends at the port. Old-timers who remember when the company was about ships, not stock prices. They told me about the contract termination. They told me about the panic in the executive suite." He paused. "And I heard the flick of a lighter and a sharp inhale. But I am calling because of what he said to you." Reed continued. "I heard he told you he could not afford your tuition, back when you were in college." "That is ancient history, Reed," I said, rubbing my temples. "He said the company was tight. He said they had to prioritize Logan's education because he was the heir." "That is a lie," Reed said. The words were flat, heavy. "It was not company money he was prioritizing. It was your money." I stopped rubbing my temples. I sat up straight. "What do you mean, my money?" "Your mother," Reed said. "Catherine. She was the smartest woman Graham ever met. She knew who he was. She knew he loved the reflection in the mirror more than anything else. Before she died, she liquidated her own portfolio. She did not trust Graham to manage it for you. She set up a custodial account, specifically for your education." My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a slow, thudding rhythm. "How much?" I asked. $250,000, Reed said. "In 1999, adjusted for inflation. That is a hell of a lot of tuition. Serenity. $250,000. I felt the air leave the room. That was not just tuition. That was freedom. That was a down payment on a house. That was the seed capital for a life I had to scrape together from nothing." "Where did it go?" I whispered. Though I already knew the answer, the nausea was rising in my throat. "Graham was the custodian," Reed said. "He had legal access until you turned 21. 2 months after he married Cynthia, he withdrew the principal, all of it. He stole it? He called it a reallocation of family assets." Reed scoffed. "He used it to pay for the remodel of the house in Wilmington. He used it to plug a hole in the pension fund he had mismanaged. And the rest? The bulk of it?" Reed let out a bitter laugh. "He used your mother's money to pay the entrance fees and the donations required to get Logan into that prep school in Connecticut, the one Logan got kicked out of a year later." I closed my eyes. The image was so sharp it cut. My mother's legacy, the last protection she had left for me, had been strip-mined to pave the road for the son of the woman who replaced her. Graham had not just chosen Logan over me. He had cannibalized my future to feed Logan's mediocrity. Did Grandma Evelyn know?" I asked. "She found out too late," Reed said. "She found out 5 years ago when she audited the old books. That is why she cut Graham out of her personal trust. That is why she gave you the voting shares. She told me she could not prosecute her own son for fraud without destroying the family name. But she could give you the weapon to bury him. Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she wanted you to be ready," Reed said. "If you had known at 22, you would have just been angry. You would have sued him and lost. Now, you are dangerous. You have the leverage." "I have the proof," Reed added. "I have the original bank transfer records. Catherine gave me copies for safekeeping because she knew Graham had sticky fingers. I have kept them in a fireproof box in Charlotte for 20 years. If you need them, they are yours." "I need them," I said. "Send them. Tonight." "Consider it done," Reed said. "Give him hell, kid." The line went dead. I sat in the silence of the conference room. I looked at the city of Austin spread out below me. I felt a coldness settling into my bones that was different from the anger I had felt before. This was not anger. This was clarity. Graham Mitchell was not just a bad father. He was a thief. He was a man who had looked at a grieving 9-year-old girl and decided she was a bank account to be raided. The next 72 hours were a blur of chaos. The termination notice from Astorvale hit Mitchell Port and Freight like a meteor. We initiated the 30-day offboarding protocol. We handed over the data keys. We gave them the routing tables, but as I had predicted, they did not know how to read them. Without my team managing the real-time adjustments, their efficiency collapsed. On Tuesday, 3 container ships sat idle in the harbor because the trucks were not there to unload them. On Wednesday, a major automotive client canceled their contract because of missed delivery windows. On Thursday, the stock price of Mitchell Port and Freight dropped 12%. It was a free fall. But Graham did not go quietly. He went on the offensive. I started seeing the headlines on industry blogs and local Savannah news sites. Sources close to the Mitchell family suggest personal vendetta behind logistics crisis. CEO. Graham Mitchell cites unstable vendor as cause of supply chain disruption. He was spinning it. He was telling anyone who would listen that I was a vindictive, mentally fragile woman who was holding the company hostage because of a family dispute. He was trying to paint himself as the victim of a daughter's tantrum. He is calling investors personally, Owen told me on Friday morning. He is telling them that you are having a breakdown. He is telling them that Astorvale is being investigated for data breach. It is a lie, obviously, but it is spooking the market. Let him talk, I said. He is flailing. But the market was smarter than Graham gave it credit for. People remembered the retirement party. They remembered the way he had mocked me. The narrative of the loving father did not fit the reality of the man who had publicly humiliated his child. Then came the call that changed the battlefield. It was Friday afternoon. My assistant transferred a call to my desk. Serenity Mitchell, I answered. Ms. Mitchell, this is David Thorne. I am a senior financial reporter with the Wall Street Journal. I paused. The Wall Street Journal. This was not a local blog. This was the big leagues. How can I help you? Mr. Thorne? I am working on a story about the supply chain crisis at Mitchell Port and Freight, he said. We have been looking into the vendor logs. We have identified Astorvale Strategies as the firm that initiated the termination. That is correct, I said. We are restructuring our client portfolio. Right, Thorne said. But here is the interesting part. I pulled the incorporation records for Astorvale in Texas. It lists a Serenity Mitchell as the sole proprietor. Is it safe to assume that you are the same Serenity Mitchell who is Graham Mitchell's daughter? The question hung in the air. I could deny it. I could hang up. I could tell him no comment. But the truth was already out. The invisible walls I had built were coming down. Yes, I said. I am. Interesting, Thorne said. I could hear him typing. So, the uneducated daughter that Graham Mitchell made fun of last week is actually the owner of the firm that has been keeping his company afloat for 3 years? Yes, I said. And now you are pulling the plug, Thorne said. Is this retaliation, Ms. Mitchell? No, I said firmly. This is business. Mitchell Port and Freight has consistently failed to meet the operational standards required by my firm. Their leadership has ignored critical risk assessments. We do not partner with liability. That is a strong statement, Thorne said. Can I quote you? You can quote me on this, I said. Astorvale Strategies builds efficiency. We do not subsidize incompetence, regardless of the last name on the door. Thank you. Ms. Mitchell. The article went live 4 hours later. The daughter who built the empire. How the black sheep of the Mitchell family secretly saved and then abandoned her father's company. It went viral. My phone exploded. Emails poured in from strangers, from women in business, from people who had been at the party. The narrative had flipped. I was not the crazy daughter. I was the mastermind. Graham was the fool who had bitten the hand that fed him. But with the vindication came a new problem. Owen walked into my office. He looked pale. Serenity, he said. We have a problem. What? The drivers, he said. I just got a call from a union rep in Savannah. He figured out who you are. He is begging us to turn the systems back on. Owen put his phone on speaker. Ms. Mitchell, the man's voice was desperate. Please, I know you and your daddy are fighting, but we have 300 guys sitting in the break room. No routes means no miles. No miles means no pay. We live paycheck to paycheck down here. If this goes on for another week, guys are going to start losing their homes. Please, don't punish us for his mistakes. I looked at the phone. I thought about the drivers. I thought about the men with calloused hands who had loaded trucks while I sat in an air-conditioned office. They were the collateral damage. I had wanted to hurt Graham. I had wanted to hurt Logan. But I had never wanted to hurt the people who actually did the work. I need a minute, I told the rep. I hung up. I walked to the window. The city lights were coming on. I had won. I had humiliated Graham. I had exposed Logan. I had proven my worth to the world. I could walk away right now. I could let the company crash, let the bankruptcy court sort it out, and live my life in Austin with my millions and my pride. But that was what Graham would do. Graham would burn a village to save his reputation. Was I him? I looked at the reflection in the glass. I saw my mother's eyes. I saw the woman who had left me $250,000 to ensure I had a future that was stolen by a man who didn't care who he hurt. If I let the company die, I was just completing Graham's work. I was finishing the destruction he started. I turned back to Owen. "Where is Natalie Pierce?" I asked. "She is in Savannah," Owen said. "Why?" "Get her on a video call," I said. "Now." 5 minutes later, Natalie's face appeared on the large screen in the conference room. She looked tired but alert. "You saw the article?" Natalie asked. "I saw it," I said. "But that is not why I am calling. The drivers are hurting. Natalie, the warehouse staff is going to get laid off if this continues for another 10 days. That is the reality of corporate warfare. Serenity," Natalie said. "Casualties. I do not accept that," I said. "I am not Graham." I reached into my bag and pulled out the file Reed had sent me, the copies of the bank transfers, the proof of the theft. "I have the smoking gun," I said. "I have proof that Graham embezzled my trust fund to finance the company and Logan's life. Combined with the audit logs of Logan's negligence, we have enough to remove them." "Remove them?" Natalie sat up straighter. "You mean a lawsuit?" "No," I said. "A lawsuit takes years. The company will be dead by then. I need something faster." I looked at the document Natalie had shown me weeks ago. The voting trust. "You told me about the clause," I said. "Section 14, the Emergency Extraordinary General Meeting." Natalie's eyes widened. "The nuclear option. If I call the meeting," I asked, "how soon does it happen?" "Under the corporate bylaws, if a shareholder with voting rights demands an emergency meeting due to gross negligence threatening the viability of the firm, the board must convene within 48 hours, Natalie said. "And who attends?" "The board of directors," Natalie said. "Graham, Logan, and you. Can I force a vote?" I asked. "To remove the CEO?" "You have 12% of the vote," Natalie said. "Graham controls 30%, but the rest of the board, the independent directors, they are scared. Serenity, they see the stock dropping. If you walk in there with a solution, if you walk in there with proof that the current leadership is criminal, you can flip them. But it is risky," she added. "If you walk into that room, you are walking into the lion's den. They will scream. They will fight. It will be ugly." I thought about the drivers. I thought about Uncle Reed, hiding in North Carolina because he was ashamed. I thought about my mother, whose legacy had been stolen. I was not afraid of the ugly anymore. I had lived in the ugly for 14 years. "I am not just walking in with a solution," I said. "I am walking in with the truth." I looked at Owen. "Prepare the jet," I said. "We are going to Savannah." I looked back at Natalie on the screen. "Draft the notice," I commanded. "Cite the clause. Cite the fiduciary breach. Tell the board that the trustee of the Skylark Trust is calling the meeting." "What is your goal? Serenity?" Natalie asked softly. "Do you want to burn it down?" I looked at the documents on the table, the evidence of my father's greed, the evidence of my stepbrother's incompetence, and the evidence of my own success. No, I said, I do not want to burn it down. I picked up the pen and signed the authorization for the meeting. Then we end it clean. The boardroom of Mitchell Port and Freight was designed to intimidate. It was situated on the top floor of the headquarters in Savannah, with windows that offered a panoramic view of the harbor, the cranes, the containers, and the ships that were currently sitting idle because of a war my father had started. The table was 30 feet of polished mahogany, surrounded by 20 leather chairs that cost more than my first car. I walked in at 9 in the morning on a Monday. I was not alone. Natalie Pierce walked beside me, carrying a briefcase that contained the dismantling of a dynasty. Owen Hart walked behind us. Carrying the solution, the room was already full. Graham sat at the head of the table, looking like a king whose castle was burning down but who refused to leave the throne. He was pale, his eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, but his suit was immaculate. To his right sat Logan, who looked less like a CEO and more like a child waiting for the principal. Cynthia sat next to him, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief, playing the role of the tragic matriarch, witnessing a family tragedy. Around them sat the board of directors, 12 men and women who controlled the fate of the company. They looked anxious. They looked at the stock ticker on the wall, which was showing another 3% drop in pre-market trading. When I entered, the conversation stopped. "This is a closed session," Graham announced, his voice tight. "Security, please escort Ms. Mitchell out. She is a vendor with a terminated contract. She has no standing here." 2 security guards in the corner took a step forward. "Actually," Natalie Pierce said, her voice cutting through the room like a gavel, "she has every standing." Natalie placed a document on the table. "I am acting legal counsel for the Skylark Trust," Natalie announced. "My client, Serenity Mitchell, is the sole beneficiary and trustee. This trust holds 12% of the preferred voting shares of Mitchell Port and Freight, under the corporate bylaws. Section 14. Paragraph B. She has convened this emergency meeting to address gross mismanagement and fiduciary breach." The security guards stopped. The board members sat up. 12%? A board member named Mr. Henderson asked. He was the one I had seen at the summit, the one Graham had bragged to. "I thought those shares were held by the Evelyn Mitchell estate. They were transferred to a blind trust 5 years ago," I said, stepping forward. "My grandmother knew that eventually. This company would need a correction. She gave me the pen to write it." Graham stood up. His face was a mask of fury. "This is a hostile takeover. She is using stolen family assets to attack us." "Stolen?" I repeated. I walked to the head of the table. I did not sit. I stood directly opposite him. "Let us talk about stealing. Graham," I signaled to Owen. He opened his briefcase and handed me a file. It was old, yellowed at the edges. The bank records Uncle Reed had sent me. I slid them down the long table. They fanned out, revealing rows of numbers and signatures. In 1999, my mother, Catherine Mitchell, established a custodial account for my education, I said, addressing the board. It contained $250,000. It was meant to ensure that no matter what happened to her, I would have a future. I pointed to a specific document. "This is the withdrawal slip from 2001, I said, "signed by Graham Mitchell. He emptied the account 2 months after he married Cynthia. He did not use it for my education. He used it to cover a liquidity gap in the pension fund he had mismanaged, and he used the rest to pay for Logan's tuition at a prep school." A gasp went around the room. "Mr. Henderson picked up the paper, his face darkening. "Is this true, Graham?" Henderson asked. "It was a family matter," Graham shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "It was a reallocation of resources. We were building a future for everyone. Serenity is twisting the past to humiliate me." "I am not here to humiliate you," I said calmly. "I am here to show this board who you really are. You stole from a 9-year-old girl to finance a lie. You told me I was worthless because you had already spent my worth. And now? Now you are doing the same thing to this company. I turned to Logan. He shrank back in his chair. You want to talk about mismanagement? I asked. I dropped the second file, the in case of emergency folder, in front of the board. This is the internal audit log for the Project Beta automation upgrade, I said. $2 million spent on software that never worked. Logan Price authorized the purchase over the written objection of your IT director. Why? Because the vendor is his friend. I looked at the board members. I saw the shift in their eyes. They were no longer looking at Graham as the legend. They were looking at him as a liability. They were looking at Logan not as the heir, but as a cancer. You are facing a crisis, I said. Your supply chain is broken. Your stock is tanking. Your employees are terrified. And the only reason you are in this mess is because you trusted two men who care more about their egos than your dividends. And what is your solution? Henderson asked. You are the one who terminated the contract. You are the one bleeding us dry. I terminated the contract because I will not work for people who abuse my staff and ignore my warnings, I said. But I do not want this company to die. There are 200 families in Savannah who depend on these jobs. I am not going to let them pay the price for Graham's greed. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table. This is a transition plan, I said. Astorvale Strategies is prepared to enter into a 90-day emergency stabilization agreement. We will turn the routing systems back on within 1 hour. We will deploy my team to your headquarters to train your internal staff. We will ensure that every truck moves and every shipment is delivered. We will stop the bleeding today. The room was silent. Hope was a palpable thing in the air. What is the cost? Henderson asked. The financial cost is standard market rate, I said. I am not gauging you, but the strategic cost is non-negotiable. I looked at Graham. I looked at Logan. I will only sign this agreement if Logan Price is removed as CEO immediately, I said. And if Graham Mitchell resigns from the board and steps down as chairman, effective today. You cannot do that, Cynthia screamed. She stood up, knocking her chair over. This is his company. He built it. You are trying to steal his legacy. He stole my mother's legacy, I said coldly. I am just balancing the books. I will not resign, Graham spat. I control 30% of this board. You cannot force me out. I control 12%, I said. And I think Mr. Henderson and the other independent directors control the rest. Let us put it to a vote. I looked at Henderson. You have seen the audit. You have seen the bank records. You know the market will not recover as long as Graham is at the helm. Do you want to save the company, or do you want to save his pride? Henderson looked at the papers in front of him. He looked at the stock ticker. He looked at Graham, who was sweating, his face a mottled red. I moved to remove Logan Price as CEO for cause, Henderson said quietly, and to request the immediate resignation of Graham Mitchell. Seconded, another director said. All in favor? Henderson asked. Hands went up. 1, 2, 5, 7. It was a landslide. Graham looked around the room. He saw his friends, his allies, the people he had golfed with for 20 years, all raising their hands against him. He was witnessing his own funeral, and he was the only one who hadn't realized he was dead. Fine, Graham whispered. He slumped into his chair. He looked suddenly very old. Fine, take it all. Motion passes, Henderson said. He turned to me. Serenity, Ms. Mitchell, who do we put in charge? You need an interim CEO, I said. Someone external, someone with no ties to the family. I have a list of 3 candidates who specialize in turnaround management. I will forward them to you. In the meantime, the COO can run daily operations with Astorvale's support. Agreed, Henderson said. I opened the folder again. One last thing, I said. The severance. We will discuss Graham's package later, Henderson said. Not his, I said. The employees. I looked at the board. This transition is going to be hard. There will be redundancies. I want to establish a worker protection fund. I am pledging 50% of the fees from this 90-day contract to a fund that will support any warehouse staff or drivers who are displaced during the restructuring. I want it in writing. I want them protected. Cynthia stared at me. You are giving the money away? I am investing in the people who actually built this company, I said. Something you never understood. I signed the transition agreement. I handed it to Henderson. The systems will be live in 60 minutes, I said. My team is already on site. I turned to leave. Serenity, Logan said. He was sitting with his head in his hands. What am I supposed to do? I have a mortgage. I have expenses. You have a degree from Wharton. Logan, I said. Use it, or don't. It is time for you to learn what the rest of us have always known. You eat what you kill. I walked out of the boardroom. The heavy oak doors closed behind me with a solid, satisfying thud. I walked down the long hallway lined with portraits of the company's history. There was a portrait of my grandfather. There was a portrait of Graham. I knew that soon. Graham's portrait would be moved to a less prominent wall, and eventually, it would be taken down altogether. I reached the elevator. I pressed the button. Serenity, I turned. Graham had followed me out. He was standing 10 feet away. He had left his jacket in the boardroom. His shirt was wrinkled. He looked like a man who had just woken up in a strange room. You planned this, he said. From the beginning, the contract, the efficiency, the trust fund. You set a trap. I didn't set a trap. Dad, I said. I just stopped saving you from yourself. He looked at me. For the first time, he was really looking at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. Con, he said, using a nickname he hadn't used since I was 6. Do you hate us that much? Is that what this was? Hate? I looked at him. I searched my heart for the anger that had fueled me for 14 years. I looked for the rage of the girl who tore up the birthday check. I looked for the pain of the teenager who was left at the dorm with nothing. I couldn't find it. It was gone, burned up in the fire of the last week. In its place was a vast, quiet space. It was the feeling of a debt finally paid. It was the feeling of a heavy coat being taken off on a hot day. No, I said softly. I don't hate you. He stepped forward, hope flickering in his eyes. Then, maybe, in time. I shook my head. I don't hate you, I repeated. I just don't need you anymore. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. I did not look back. I pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the image of my father standing alone in the hallway, I took a deep breath. I walked out of the building and into the Savannah sunlight. It was bright. It was warm. I took my phone out of my pocket. I had a text from Uncle Reed. Well done. Kid, your mom is smiling. I had a text from Mara Klein at Rapid Route. Saw the news. Hell of a job. Lunch is on me next time you are in Texas. And I had an email from my team at Astorvale. Systems are live. Traffic is moving. We are back in business. I walked to my rental car. I threw my briefcase in the passenger seat. I was 34 years old. I was the owner of a multi-million-dollar company. I was the woman who had taken down a titan without raising her voice. But more importantly, for the first time in my life, I was just Serenity. And that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on how I handled my family. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Jane Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.